Hello, welcome back to the ToDo app, part 3. If you want to catch up, you can watch part 1 and part 2. In this part, we're going to start doing some code, but before that, I want to talk about the efficiency of a table view. If we run this app, so I'm going to run it by doing run, and I'm going to show you that the app only has a certain number of cells. So, for instance, on this screen we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, about 12 cells. Cells actually take up a lot of memory in the device. So what we want to do is, even though this table may have hundreds of pieces of data, there's really only ever 10 or 11 cells on screen. So what we want to do is we want to be able to reuse cells rather than delete and recreate them. So what happens is iPhone will automatically create sort of like a queue of available cells. So what we have to do is get ready for that queue. And the idea is when one cell leaves the screen, instead of being deleted and freed, it's put back on the queue. To do this, we're first going to select the table view, and you can remember you can always look over here to make sure it's selected. And we're going to go to the Attributes Inspector. You'll notice here that it says that there's 1 prototype cell. 0 prototype cells. I'm going to make that into a 1. You'll notice here a prototype cell has appeared in the table. As well, I can now open up the table and I can choose that cell. There's many different types of cells. There's 4 built-in types, and you can make any custom type of cell you wish. Later on in this course, we'll be making lots of custom cells, but for this example, we're going to use the subtitle style. A subtitle style has an optional image which we won't be using. The key thing that we need here is what's called the identifier. The identifier is how we're going to ask to get cells out of the cell queue. It's how we're going to reuse those cells. So I'm going to call this the cell. So in other words, when I need a cell from the queue, I'm simply going to ask for a cell of type the cell. So, well, just a quick recap. I've added a prototype cell to my cell view, and you'll see it over here. Okay, and as well, I've made it into a subtitle cell. Now, the next step is we need to get access to this table view and to these buttons within our code. So this is something that's kind of neat. We're going to go up here, and instead of using the standard editor, we're going to click on the assistant editor. And with the assistant editor, you'll see that we get the main storyboard file on this side, and we get the view controller on this side. So we have our code, and we have our layout. Remember, we know this table view is a view controller, because if we click on here, and we look at the Attributes Inspector, we know it's a view controller. That's how these two are linked. Now, what I want to do is I want to make the view controller, I want to make the table view available to the view controller. So I'm going to control drag from the table view into my code, and you'll see a blue line appears. I'm going to let go, and when we're making a variable, that's called an outlet. This outlet, I'm going to name it a table view. So if I say connect, I now have a variable in code named table view of type UI table view. Don't worry about this exclamation mark yet, which is associated to this table view in code. So that's kind of neat. We were able to link our visual app to our code. The next thing we want to do is we want these buttons. Now, do we actually want the buttons to be in the code, or do we want the button actions to be in the code? Well, sometimes you might want the button, for example, in the code you might want to enable or disable the button. But in our case, all I want is to be able to run an action when the button's clicked. So again, I'm going to control click, and this time I'm going to drag down here. And in the name here, I'll say do quick add. But instead of an outlet, we're going to make this an action. And the type of the action is going to be based on a bar button. If I click connect, you'll see it built a method for us. And this method will get executed whenever the quick add is pressed. I'll do the same thing for the add button. So I'm going to call this do add. It's going to be an action. It's going to be based on a bar button. And boom, there we go. So I now have an association between my code and between my storyboard. Okay, let me go back to just the storyboard for a minute by going back to my standard editor. There's one last thing we have to think about. When this table view wants data, it's got to get the data from somewhere. In other words, this table view needs to have a data source. Because it's a table view on its own, it has no data. It's got to ask somebody for the data. The way we do that is via a protocol. In other words, we have to tell this table view who to get data from. Well, the best place for this table view to get data from is where? Is from the view controller. So what we're going to do here is we're going to control drag from the table view up to the view controller. And you'll see there's an outlet called DataSource. And I'll make sure this works. If I click on the table view and go over here, this is called the connections. You'll see the data source is the view controller. That means that whenever the table view wants data, so when somebody's scrolling and we need more data to fill in the cells, the table view is going to ask the view controller. So let's recap. We now have a table view with a prototype cell. We've connected the table view to the code via an outlet. We've connected the two buttons to the code via actions. And we've told the table view that its data source is the view controller. In the next video, we're going to tie a lot of this up by writing up some code. See you then.